It's game day indeed. Here we go, Warchant game day. Jeff, that's Tom, and I tell you, fired up for a little Warchant game day. It's been a minute since Florida State provided the nervous energy that we all get on a meaningful game day where there are stakes at hand and the opportunity to prove something but lose something is all there with a team that might be able to do something about it. The Noles on the road tonight against Virginia in Charlottesville. And for those of you of a certain age like myself, you remember the horror of being in the top 10 and facing Virginia on the road in Charlottesville on a Thursday night in 1995. It's many moons later, and Florida State has something on the line again, and another odd day to play a game, this one on a Friday. But that's what they'll do tonight, and Virginia's got quite the offense. So is Florida State's defense ready? Put the clamps on a very dangerous quarterback and bully Virginia on the ground themselves. We shall see. Tommy, I think that's where we should begin. And I believe that, honestly, that's the path to victory for Florida State tonight. You go back and watch the NC State game. I know you've watched most of Virginia's games. I've seen halves of each of Virginia games. I couldn't be bothered to watch the whole games. But I saw what I needed to see. I especially saw what I needed to see against NC State, which was a team in the Wolfpack that I don't think is very good, and yet they ran for over 200 yards on Virginia. And I think, again, that's the path that you think about Virginia's defense. They got bullied in that game, and really NC State could have done anything they wanted to do. And I go back to that because I think Florida State's offensive attack is obviously centered around the rushing game, the running game, and I think this offensive line is good enough to travel and go up there and get the job done for Florida State tonight. I think that's going to be the modus operandi.
Yeah, I think the NC State game gets Virginia's attention from their defensive standpoint of, oh, God, we need to do a lot of things and fix a lot of things, but I don't know how much they can do. And I think that's the story of tonight is if NC State alerted you to a lot of your deficiencies, how much can you correct in real time against an opponent in Florida State that you have not seen the likes of on your schedule this season? This is Virginia's fifth game, but they have not seen an offensive line like this. They've not seen skill position players like this. C.J. Bailey is a decent facsimile of Tommy Castellanos in terms of his ability to run and throw on the run.
Yes.
But by and large, when you're going 1 through 11 on offense, they have not seen one like this for Florida State. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of open things for the Noles. It's just going to be dependent upon how Virginia wants to give up the production here. I think between the 20s, Florida State's going to move the ball. Outside of unforced errors and penalties, which are also unforced errors, Virginia, I think, is going to give up a lot of yardage. But it's the situations tonight that Florida State needs to execute in, and we'll see how the Cavs decide how they want to play it. Do they want to stack? Do they want to play back? What do they want to take away or try to take away? Because Florida State is coming in as an offensive machine. A lot of people talking about Virginia's offense this week. Florida State's offense is better. So that's the path to victory tonight for Florida State, is when the offense is on the field.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you know why that people are talking about Virginia's offense and why they're maybe not talking as much about Florida State's offense, because they recognize that while Florida State dominated the Alabama game, that really is the only competition they've faced, scoring 77 points on East Texas A&M, and it could have been 177 points if they wanted it to, isn't going to cause anybody to take a good long look at Florida State's offense. And then you had the game where you run for almost 500 yards in 66-10 against Kent State. And again, people will say, well, outmatched. What it's led to is the fact that Florida State has the number one ranked offense in the country. They're number 2 in rushing. They're number 2 in yards per completion. It all adds up to Florida State being number 1 in the country. But again, a lot of people think that might be a bit of a fugazi because obviously they only had the one opponent, and that was Alabama. And they look good against Alabama. A chance tonight to prove that it's not a paper tiger, but rather a very real and stout offense that you have to deal with and that the rest of the country is going to have to contend with throughout the course of this year. Virginia, on the other hand, and when we flip it to that side of the ball, Tom, that's the side that they have to win with. And I think that's why the conversation is about Virginia's offense, because they know, I think anybody that analyzes this game and that has done a preview of this game would say, well, Virginia's going to have to win in a shootout. They're going to have to win a high-scoring game if they're going to win at all. They're not going to hold Florida State back, but they think they may be equipped to do it, and it's because of the quarterback, Chandler Morris, who's very talented, who's completing 70% of his throws. He's thrown for over 1,000 yards. He already has 8 touchdowns. He's very mobile. He's 24 years old. He can make plays. So I get it. When teams are trying to pull an upset and another team is highly ranked and they're on the road on a Friday night, people are waiting to see, is there a shakeup in the ACC? And this would be a massive shakeup in the ACC if it were to happen. That's the side of the ball you're going to point to. You're going to say Chandler Morris, Tony Elliott's offense. This is what we've been waiting for since he got to Virginia. Finally, we have something that looks like it did at Clemson. Here we go.
Yeah, this is where you focus on the underdog if you're the national media. How does the underdog make this game close? How does the underdog score the upset? But I think you could effectively argue that while Virginia's offense looks dangerous, they faced less competition than Florida State has. Look, that Stanford defense and Kent State, you could switch jerseys, and I don't think you'd see any difference in production and productivity. They've played William and Mary and NC State. I'm telling you, Duke just ran it up on NC State. So I don't know that Virginia's offense has faced anything close to the test that Florida State's offense did in week 1 against Alabama, which is why not trying to argue with that third party who's not here on the screen. But Florida State is the more proven of the two teams tonight. The next thing that we're looking for is to check another box of maturity, check another box of communication, efficiency of operation when Florida State hits the road. It's the one thing they haven't done yet. But if they go on that road tonight, they get on the field at Scott Stadium, and they look anything like that they have so far in their first 3 home games, it gets really fun really fast to think about what could be for Florida State, because I can't think of many other intangibles that Florida State has to clear in terms of hurdles other than a road game. Because you think about the consistency, the ferocity, the physicality that they played with in these last 2 games. I love that they ran for over 500 yards last week. They could have ran the clock out and not run up a score, and they would have won the game 41-10. And, we wouldn't have learned anything about them. I think you do learn something when they decide to go for 7 bills for the second game in a row and run for 500 yards. There's a mentality that they're trying to force into being, a culture that they're trying to forge here through these first 3 games, And that running game mentality is something that you like to say a lot. It travels. It travels. And that's what you want to see tonight, is take this offense on the road, make it travel, show that physicality, make it travel. And at that point, we're talking about something pretty fun here.
Well, and that's the other thing, is right around the corner, and you're being told, don't peek around the corner, stay right here. But there's something really interesting right around the corner. Well, no. Again, you're not allowed to look at it just yet. But if you were to look around that corner, man, is there something cool? But don't look. That's kind of how stuck we are right now, thinking about potentially the game of the year in college football, Florida State, Miami. But it only happens, and it's going to be a big game regardless, but it only really becomes that magnificent if you take care of business tonight. I think the other question that a lot of people want to know, and we've talked about it all week long, is how good is Florida State's secondary? Because, Ty Simpson had his tough patches in the game against Florida State, but he did throw for over 250 yards, and he left a lot of yards out on the field. And you pointed that out earlier this week. There were some open guys, and they did have a receiver go off. It just wasn't the one we thought was going to. You saw him get burned and get suckered into a big play in their last game against Kent State. So there have been a few lapses in the secondary that you worry a veteran quarterback, a very good skill player to throw to, could expose a little bit tonight. And all of a sudden, then maybe you're in a game. And that's kind of the other part of this is, can you get that a little bit more dialed in, a little bit more buttoned up tonight on the road?
Yeah, this is an offense that reminds me a whole lot of Mike Norvell's offense with Jordan Travis. There's a whole lot of the same elements, formations, concepts, everything from using the pistol a lot to the bubble screen as an outlet on many of their running plays, if not all their running plays, when you're looking and you're counting who's in the box and how many guys are on the perimeter. The quarterback run is involved a lot in this offense. There's a lot of those same principles. And then there's a little bit of Gus Malzahn in this offense for Virginia as well, as it relates to trick plays, misdirection plays, eye candy, all those types of things where you get super aggressive with it and you call things that you go, holy cow, they must have spent a lot of time on that deceptive play. That's what Florida State is facing tonight. The other thing I'd say about this offense is because they have a good quarterback, they also have concepts that beat both man and zone. They've got answers for both. They've got receivers and a tight end who are dynamic, I think, if they're in one-on-one and in space. But they have not – this is the grand question. I think all those players are good for Virginia, but honestly, with the defensive players they've been going against through 4 games, I don't know how good. So to what extent are Virginia's playmakers legitimate? And I think that's what tonight's test is. If you look at it that way, we could say, yes, there's a mystery for Florida State in the secondary because not ideal against Alabama, but plenty good enough to win. But to what extent is Florida State's secondary better than it was a year ago? To what extent do they understand the scheme of Tony White against a quarterback who is game and will throw with anticipation? And then on the other sideline, to what extent are these playmakers for Virginia legitimate? And we'll probably get a good answer here within about a quarter and a half tonight.
Yeah, you want to see Florida State take the crowd out of the game here. The recipes for upsets on the road and, against the lesser team usually begin with, the genesis of those upsets begin with a good start for the home team in this situation, meaning their offense gets out on the field. They have the defense confused. They go down and score. And then for whatever reason, your offense doesn't combat it by coming out and making a drive of their own or putting a drive of their own together. And next thing you know, the crowd's, been whipped into a fervor and you're having to deal with something a little bit more than you thought you were going to have to deal with coming into the game because now the team believes. Now the crowd believes. Now the players believe. And now you're dealing with this, a real situation. And a lot of times veteran teams overcome that. A lot of times veteran teams handle that. They gather themselves, compose themselves, and just keep playing the next play. And eventually your talent wins out. But we don't know how Florida State would react to a scenario like that. So I think as fans, we sit around today a little bit nervous that things like that happen on the road. Things like that happen in college football all the time. I talk about college kids being subject to the whims of emotion much more than professionals who do this for a living, who are 35 years old or 32 years old and have seen everything there is to see. College kids can be subject to emotion and really get caught up in it. So we'll see if Florida State has to deal with that tonight or if they take it away. And the way you take it away is to go up there tonight and the first time you possess the ball, you run it down their throat. If you're going to run the ball and you're going to bully somebody, and that's what Gus Malzahn would like to do. I mean, this offense is predicated on the run. We know what the run splits are. If you're able to establish that early, crowd gets taken out of the game because they know that's not going to get better as the game goes on.
Yeah, agreed. If you can do that early, that's the best sign of all. I think that there's going to be a lot of open passes early for Florida State, and I think they need to take advantage of those. But let's just say that those passes are open. You decide to run the ball anyway, and you still run successfully. It's going to be a long night for Virginia. It doesn't mean that this is a decided result. I think we both feel pretty confident. I know it's only the first segment that Florida State's going to go up there and get the job done tonight. But, I mean, the evidence, everything points to when Florida State's offense is on the field that they're going to produce tonight. It's just a matter of, do they produce in the red zone? Do they come away with touchdowns when they're in the red zone? Do they stay away from turnovers? And then defensively, we got to find out what we got here. And that's the fun of this game. You're going to feel a hell of a lot more confident about the Miami game tonight after this game's over, or you're going to feel a little bit more questions have arisen as it relates to the Miami game tonight. This is finally a lesson that we can learn about Florida State because think about it. Basically, for the last month, we haven't learned anything. Since the game was over against Alabama, you've learned about their mentality, their desire to dominate, and their desire to play physical. Those are all great things. But when you're trying to measure just how good you are within power football, within the college football playoff discussion, you really haven't learned much of anything. And tonight, we finally start to uncover some of that puzzle.
It's eagerly anticipated because obviously you lit the match when you beat Alabama and you created the ability for Florida State fans to dream. And it's been a minute since Florida State fans could dream. We had the undefeated season, obviously, and unfortunately that was squashed by a lack of integrity in the sport and the manipulation for a TV show and an invite. And so when that happened, obviously we know the program was sent reeling, and we witnessed devastating effects somewhat brought on by that, somewhat brought on by our own mistakes. But my point is that you spent more than a year sitting around dreaming what it would be like to play meaningful football games, dreaming what it would be like to eagerly anticipate a game, dreaming what it would be like to matter on the national stage and to look ahead at your schedule and talk about the moments that could define a championship type run. And I felt that this morning when I got up. I felt all of that. The game that matters is tonight, because you know what it sets up, and you know that it is the off ramp to a real run, like a real opportunity to go to the college football playoff. It's funny because before the year when we were doing W's and L's, we had a lot of emails and people in the chat talking about this particular game, even before we had played the Alabama game, because what they were theorizing in that moment was that your path to try to compete and win the ACC, which is an automatic bid to the playoff, really begins tonight. And if you could win that game, then mentally you would flip a switch as well and give yourself the best chance to succeed in the Miami game. The Alabama game is a non-conference game. We were huge underdogs and we wanted to win it. And it seems like, obviously everybody went in there wishful, but I don't know that anybody went in there certain that they were going to get a win. Well, now this is an entirely different feeling, because you did get that win and you dominated that football game and you opened up the realm of possibilities much greater than you thought in the offseason. And now this Virginia game, which we knew was important in the ACC, feels bigger than the ACC. It feels like it matters to the cause, the ultimate cause, which is a postseason berth for sure, but a real run at a high seed and a chance to play in the playoffs and maybe make a go of it.
There was one small thing that I really liked from the coordinator press conferences on Sunday, and it happened quick, and so many people might not have noticed it. But Gus Malzahn was speaking about the accomplishments of last Saturday's game and what they did in that stretch run. And he said he's willing to say the quiet part out loud. We told our guys these are lesser opponents. This is what you should do to lesser opponents. Typically, coaches, even against low-level FBS teams or FCS teams, don't ever want to go there. They don't want to categorize the hierarchy of their opponents and belittle them, or at least make it seem like they're belittling them, instead of, you could just argue that's a fact. That's the way it is. That Gus is willing to say that to the media, that, hey, we told our guys, yeah, whoop-de-doo, you dominated. That's what you're supposed to do against lesser opponents. I love hearing that, because that means that there is no satisfaction whatsoever. And it also means that they see this game for what it is. Like, that just gives me a higher degree of confidence that when they're in those meeting rooms and they take a look at Virginia film, which is not impressive, when Florida State's offense is meeting and they're looking at Virginia defensive film, that Gus will call that out and say, this ain't good, guys, but you know what? You should dominate in this moment. Sometimes I feel like teams take a look, and you could speak to this better. You've been in those film rooms in your life. When they see that an opponent is outgunned, they relax. The fact that Gus is willing to say, this is a lesser opponent, you should dominate them, tells me that if they're sitting in that room and they're watching the NC State game and they're watching the Stanford game, and they go, good God, that they're being challenged, that there is a standard that they're being held to independent of opponent. And that's the type of attitude that you need to have in a moment like this, because in college football betting terms and traditional terms, this is a look-ahead spot. But I like hearing the language from a coach that says we're going to defend against a look-ahead spot because we're expecting a higher level of production.
Yeah, it's funny. He went out and set records, Tom. I mean, I can only imagine the mentality that it takes to put up 775 yards of total offense in the win against Kent State. It's the most in the nation. Nobody else has put up 775 yards. A lot of teams have played bad teams. A lot of people have played FCS schools and the like, and they haven't put up 775 yards, but Florida State did. By the way, side note, just because it's fun, and I want to bring it up because it made me smile when I read the game notes, the 775 yards that Florida State put up against Kent State last week is not only the most in the nation, it is the most since 2020 that anybody's put up in a game. Can you guess who put up more than that in a game, and against whom?
In 2020, the COVID year?
Yeah.
Oh God, I don't know. Was it Gus at UCF? I don't know.
No, it was North Carolina putting up nearly 780 yards against Miami.
That's a wonderful setup.
Yes, it was 62-26, everybody, lest we forget. In Miami, those fans got to go to the game and witness North Carolina score 60 plus on them and put 778 yards on that ass. It was a glorious night indeed. Sorry, just a trip down memory lane for some of the great shenanigans that goes on in Hard Rock. That's a side note. But yeah, so Florida State put together the most yards any team has put together since North Carolina humiliated the Miami Hurricanes in Miami. That's just nice. Point is, though, it does speak to a mentality, because you're right. Lots of teams look at lesser foes and do relax. Lots of teams don't decide to try to go after school records and the like. I think it does speak to a mentality. I think it does say to your players, well, no, we're not worried about who they are. It's about who we are, and this is the way we play the game. And if you don't want to do that, then I'll find somebody else who does. And consistently, that's the way they've acted. I mean, you hear it from both sides of the ball, is my point. You know, they're still coming after people in the second half of these games that they're up 40. You know, you still watch Tony White call a defense, and you watch Gus Malzahn, even with backups in. We're not dialing anything back here. And I don't really know how you can dial it back in this offense, because it is predicated on bullying people. That's not going to change. And it is predicated on some tempo. So, you know, you really probably can't dial back. It's just not part of the lexicon. It's who you are.
Yes, it is. However, that's all true. The one thing I did like from the first three games, if you're just looking at a swath of those, is when Florida State did have the lead late against Alabama, they were capable of snapping with 5 seconds to go on the play clock, which I just like to see situationally, that Gus isn't so stubborn. He's like, I don't care that we're up 14. Let's go run more plays.
Yeah.
That's going to be the battle tonight, I think, and it could be that both teams want to just engage in this thing and try to play 52-49. It could be. I know Gus will be game for that. Gus most certainly is down for that.
Yeah, I don't need 52-49. That doesn't bode well for the next week. But
of course. I'm just saying that Virginia could decide that that's their best path, is to keep giving your offense the ball more and more and more. But it could be that Virginia decides that, they've got a lot of dudes, and the less that their dudes are, I love my offense, but I'm going to use the weapon of my quarterback. We're going to go for it on fourth down a lot, and we're going to run 6-minute drives and 7-minute drives, and we'll get down there. I'm telling my offense, well, Tony Elliott is, but I'm telling myself that we have an extra down here in all these situations. You could play it that way so that Gus doesn't get the satisfaction of getting in a groove and throwing quantity at the problem in terms of plays. That's going to be another interesting thing. How did Virginia see this on film, and how did they devise their strategy? Because Florida State's offense would scare you if you're a defensive coordinator and you're looking at that film. You go, holy geez, they can fly at every position. They got at least two receivers that can fly. They got two gadget guys that are lightning speed. Their quarterback is a missile. They've got 2 or 3 dynamic running backs. They just got their best tight end back, who was a big part of their game against Alabama. How the hell do we attack these guys?
For that reason, and I know we have to break, but for that reason, I think if I were Virginia, I wouldn't lie to myself. I would know that I was not going to get stops, and I would play fast, and I would play for a shootout. I would tell my defense to take chances. I mean, I don't think we can step up and get stops. I wouldn't say that to them, but it would be implied. But we're going to take chances. We're going to blitz. We're going to try to jump routes. You're going to, you know what, guys? Play with reckless abandon. If you get burned and it's a 70-yard touchdown because you tried to jump one, I understand. We're trying to create a path to more points. We're trying to create more possessions. We're trying to change the momentum with a big play on defense. I say you go for it, because we're really going to play like a bat out of hell on offense, and we're going to run our quarterback nuts. And, that's the way I think I would play if I were them. But you're right. We don't know. And the intrigue is, do they lie to themselves and say we can get stops? Or do they go, no, we can't get stops. Let's take chances. Let's take chances tonight. It's Warchant Game Day. It's also hour 3 of the Jeff Cameron Show. Thanks for sticking around. More in a moment.
Hey, this is Jay Green from Hotel Indigo Tallahassee. Can I stop and say thank you? Thank you for telling your guests to stay with us. Thank you for hosting your corporate meetings and social events in our rooftop meeting space. Thank you for hanging out with us on FSU Football Game Day. Believe it or not, this sales guy isn't selling anything. I just want to say thank you. But If you've never seen our rooftop and I can ever help, give us a call, 850-755-9011. We are Hotel Indigo Tallahassee. Welcome to our neighborhood.
For Florida State, it was nice to see an injury report that was not littered with names. You look at the Virginia injury report coming into this game, and it was a novel. They've got a lot of guys out. A few of them are key players, including along the offensive line. You don't root for injury, but it's a reality of this sport. So you take a look at that information, and it favors Florida State big time going into this game. Florida State is relatively healthy. For a football team going into their fourth game, you don't usually see so few players listed on the injury report. There wasn't one as of last year, but we were always in the know as to who was in and who was out. And Florida State has kind of come through these first three games as they get set into conference play. Very healthy, very healthy, healthier than we thought they would be given some of the injuries in the fall and in the spring. So Florida State is emerging, I would say, as a healthy group. That's good news. The guy I want to see tonight, Tom, and I'll start there, and then I'll let you come back and pick a guy yourself, and that I'm most excited about is Pittman. I've talked about this before. I think he's the guy that is, for Florida State, the physicality on offense, the dude that really sets the tone, and he comes back from injury himself and will play tonight, and that's good news. That's the guy I want to see setting the tone.
Yeah, a player I'm excited tonight. I'll stay on the offensive side. He only has 2 catches this year for 47 yards. One of them was a high-profile catch. Squirrel White. Squirrel White only has 2 catches, everybody. We remember the big one on 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 11 on the first touchdown drive of the game for Florida State against Alabama. There is no injury designation for Squirrel White, which is great to see. We all know we saw at different points, be it on the sideline of the second game of the season or around town, what's going on with the hand? Is that a soft cast? Is that a wrist? Is that a hand? There's no injury designation whatsoever. This could be a big boon for Florida State on a night against a secondary that is really slow for Virginia. I don't know whether they're going to pass first because of the look they get or they're going to run first because that's their identity. But what I do know is unequivocally, Virginia has given up plays over the top. And while Deuce Robinson can run a sub 4.5 40, according to Papa Dominic Robinson, and I believe that after watching what he did in the first quarter of our second game of the season, Squirrel is your burner, man. Squirrel is your burner as a traditional receiver. Mekhi Danzy is growing into that role. Mekhi Danzy is looking more refined as a receiver, but Squirrel was brought here to do just that. I'm really excited to see him integrate into the offense, because he has not been fully integrated into the offense yet, and that could be a really scary proposition if you have Squirrel White at full health and Randy Pittman back to full health. You could argue that we have not seen this Florida State offense operating at peak just yet, which is wild considering the production they put up.
Yeah, well, we've only seen Randy Pittman play in one game, and that was against Alabama. And obviously, he then needed a small procedure, I guess, to right an injury that he played with in that Alabama game. And so they nursed that well, and he comes back. And I just think he's going to have a whale of a season. I think he's that kind of player. I'm going to pick him every week just about as a guy that is a catalyst for what they do. But you're right. Look at the way they've spread the ball around. I mean, it's amazing to see the numbers that they've amassed, but because they've played so many people and they've featured so many different looks and people that they wanted to get the ball to, no one person has mega numbers outside of Tommy. You know, no one person has really been the bell cow for this offense. And, certainly that isn't, Deuce had the huge game and then been relatively quiet in the others. Squirrel had that huge play, a couple big plays, as you say, but that's all. Lucas featured heavily in one game. It was an important game. Virtually, persona non grata since. There's been a lot of that in this offense.
Yeah, yes, you're right. The second most featured player in the offense, it's not a running back because we give it to Sawchuk, right? But is Danzy, and he's got 299 yards on 9 touches. Like that'll do. And I would imagine that something to do with the Mekhi Danzy reverse is coming up tonight. But is it actually a reverse? Or are they finally going to break a trick off of the reverse where they're going to use the front side of the play and put something else on film for Miami to consider on the way, hopefully, to a win tonight? Mekhi Danzy has been the second most consistent weapon. I would have thought Deuce or Squirrel would have definitely been that at this point in the season. We're 25% of the way through the season, but that just hasn't been the case. It's been 19.
It's funny too, because everybody in this fan base is excited to see what Gus has cooked up off of that reverse. Everybody knows there's some other element. And it's funny about it because when you watch it on replay and you can pause it, you see the opportunities, you see the possibilities. You say, well, if he wanted to, and you look at, well, that's got to be so fun, not just for a coach, but for a coach who has a weapon that is one of the fastest humans, because it changes every aspect. I had a buddy of mine ask me, how do you play the reverse with a guy that fast? And he was talking about defensive football. And I said, well, it depends on what you're in. First of all, if you're in man, you want to continue to push him to the outside if you can. If you're in zone, you funnel him back into where there's people, and so I said, there's two different ways to play that. But first of all, you can't fall for the bait, and then because there's going to be a pass off of it. So you're a little bit screwed here when somebody's that kind of fast and can get to their spot. And now you've got to, naturally, you have to play with a cushion against anybody that fast. You have to do it anyhow and read the play. And it gets hard because the second you read that he keeps, you're not fast enough. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, those guys are fast enough in the secondary to do something about it. But this is a different kind of weapon.
Oh, he is. And they've done it a couple different ways. The first 2 times they ran the reverse, it was basically the same look. Well, 3 times because they ran it twice against Alabama, right? So in the first 2 games, they ran it 3 times. This last play was a Sawchuck flip because it was handed off to Sawchuck, and then it's a true old school kind of Bobby Bowden looking reverse for Danzy. But they got frontside stuff on it with Castellanos where he's got a lead blocker. And that's some of the stuff that they've shown. And that could be either lead blocker for Tommy, or Tommy runs full speed, everybody commits to him, and then he pops it over their head, and you have that outlet pass because, obviously he's still a quarterback. Yeah, the thing that you got to do in those situations is take very conservative angles. If Mekhi Dancy is on a reverse, if you think you're going to meet him at a spot, you should probably give yourself an extra 3 or 4 yards of latitude because you're going to be in real trouble. And that's the thing about this offense where Gus you're right, he has to be so happy is, of course, he's got one of the fastest humans in the history of this conference and the history of NCAA football in Mekhi Danzy because of what he can do at the 400. But it's not like Tommy's slow, and it's not like Squirrel's slow, and it's not like Deuce Robinson or Jalen Lucas are slow. You have speed everywhere. And the impressive thing that I found through these first few weeks is you have all that speed, and yet I don't think speed is your identity. I think physicality is your identity. Typically, when you have burners, you look like an air raid team, or you look like maybe one of the Oregon teams from yesteryear. But I would say physical is the first word I would use for this offense. I wouldn't use fast.
Yes, I think that is correct. And I think that's how you can expect Florida State to play on the road. I mean, that's the reason you get excited. And when I say expect Florida State to play on the road, I mean have expectations, feel good about them playing on the road because that physicality travels. Running the ball, beating people up. The game ultimately comes down to being more physical, to dominating the trenches, to establishing, in Gus's case especially, the run. Well, you do that through being very, very physical, being very, very tough. And yeah, they've got speed elements to complement all of that, which is the reason you get excited because you have big playability. But honestly, you really want to beat people up. And listen, how good is this offensive line? I don't think the Virginia game is going to answer that. The Miami game will. But this, if we think this line is good, and we do, they ought to be able to go on the road tonight and establish themselves.
Yeah, look, I'm always pointing back to earlier examples, and you can get better as a team. Like that can happen. But when NC State's offensive line is pushing Virginia around, that makes me excited to see what our offensive line is going to do tonight. Yeah. Maybe NC State's offensive line is good, and we'll find out early, and we'll say, oh, they're doing about the same thing, or they're doing a little worse. Whoa, they're doing a little worse than the Wolfpack. What's going on here? But, man, I got to tell you, NC State could have just kept it on the ground the entire game if they wanted to, but they needed to get their quarterback involved, and they did use the passing game on the way to 35 points and not a whole lot of time of possession. They caught up at the end to get that thing close, but it was 32-28 Virginia, and Virginia was holding on to the ball early in that game, and yet NC State didn't waver, and whatever C.J. Bailey wanted, he got. If it is a pick your poison thing and they're playing neutral, I think Florida State will run the ball. We'll see what Virginia does. But, yeah, that offensive line, I expect production at that offensive line tonight. And I love that they're committed to it, even when they don't have to be. They had a perfect split against East Texas A&M, where the offense was about 360 going either way. And then they could have their druthers against Kent State, and it's 500 plus on the ground. That's a great identity to have.
Flip it. There's an offensive player you're excited to see, or to see how Florida State defends. Because I'll be honest with you, for me, I know most people are going to look at a different receiver, but I'm looking at Cam Ross. He's got 19 receptions on the year. He's their slot receiver. He's on par. If you look at his career numbers, he's a transfer from James Madison. He also played at UConn. He's played a lot of football, is my point. And he's been a very productive player. And he's got some wiggle. He's 185 pounds soaking wet. And this is a guy that they really depend on. He's on his way to career highs across the board. They've kind of featured him. And so, that slot matchup is something we're going to be watching very, very closely. He's a player tonight that I want to see how Florida State defends.
Agreed there. Dakota Twitty is the tight end. He only has 6 catches this year for 100 yards, but I'm telling you, he's a mismatch down the field. And so I want to see who they match up against him. Is that Earl Little's job? Is that a linebacker who has a coverage specialties job? Who is it Edwin Joseph? Who is it that they're going to throw at that particular player? Because Twitty, from what I've seen, does have the understanding and the knowledge downfield of if it's man, if it's zone, here's what I do to position myself to make the catch, which in zone, it's usually sit down. If it's man, let's play basketball and shield off the goal and make sure that we use our body to get in the way of things. So I like the subtleties to Twitty's game. And then also I really like Jamari Taylor. Like, I don't know that Virginia's offensive line is going to hold up tonight. If it does, Jamari Taylor will never bail you out on a play. He doesn't easily go down. He does have pretty good vision as well. He can cut back against the flow of what the offense is trying to block up if he sees it's not there and make a play on the backside. Is he as explosive and shifty as what's his face last year from Clemson? Forgive me, the running back.
Yeah, that one's a big guy, though.
Yeah, well, no, not Phil Maffa. Not Phil Maffa.
Maffa's big.
I'm talking about, well, I could say it, the white kid. That kid was, you really had to stay in your lane on the backside, and he was going to make you pay. There's a little bit of that here from Jamari Taylor, but then also, if you're head up and you're not committed to bringing him down, if you half step for just a second, he will run you over. He's a bowling ball. He's not very tall, 5'9", but he's well over 200 pounds, and he does have a little bit of breakaway speed. So Jamari Taylor is one, and then Twitty's the other.
Well, Jamari Taylor is also featured in the passing game, Tom, and that's why I think, to your point, they know that they can't line up and just run the ball traditionally, but they do want to get the ball in his hands, and so they do so in incorporating him in the passing game, and he's a good back for that. He catches the ball well. So I like your choice. I should point out for people, we always do this when we can. They have a tight end named Sage Ennis. Sage Ennis played at Lincoln. A lot of you probably remember him if you go to high school games, and certainly Lincoln has produced en masse a ton of talent over the years. And Sage originally, if I remember correctly, went off to Clemson, but then battled injuries. He's had some problems with injuries in his football career. A lot of people do. It's unfortunate, but I think that's what led to him eventually being passed over at Clemson, and it's why he transferred, and he's at Virginia. By the way, good choice, because if you get a degree from Virginia, you're doing some things, less so from Clemson. And, good for you, Sage, but Tallahassee's own is my point. You may see him out there tonight for Virginia, the Lincoln product, Sage Ennis at tight end. He's not their feature tight end, though.
And just for sanity, I'm sure I've gotten yelled at by thousands of people already. It's Will Shipley. It's Will Shipley that I was thinking of.
Well, I knew it was Will. I couldn't remember his last name, so I just let it go.
Well, those were, last year was a rough year. And so I think even though Shipley played in the prior seasons, I just tried to kind of block that out. Even the one win we got to break up the Bohica wasn't exactly a masterpiece either. So this whole Florida State Clemson thing, I try to block out. But the point being, mind your P's and Q's on defense. They've got a lot of playmakers. You mentioned a couple. I mentioned a couple. And if you cheat, you will get burned, because Chandler Morris will find it. He is a very smart player.
Well, and there's a world of difference between quarterbacks who can run and those who want to run. And unfortunately, they got one who likes to run. He's not afraid, and he'll exploit you, and he'll lower his shoulder.
He will. And the thing is, I think Ty Simpson for Alabama is a willing runner, but the scheme doesn't want you to run, and he's being coached not to run. This scheme is like all for it, brother, all for it. I'm sure that's the rule is, hey, you see it, go take it. I don't need you to work through progressions. If you want to, wonderful. But when he gets going too, he's got that low center of gravity running style thing that Manziel had, that Baker Mayfield had. But he really can go. He's way faster than those two.
And he's also bigger. He's also, I mean, he's taller and bigger. Yeah, he's a nice player. By the way, I know this is Warchant game day, and we're going to keep it here, but very interested to see that Georgia-Alabama game because there's a chance Ty Simpson's going to have a coming out party here. He's starting to play exceptionally well. Now, again, Wisconsin is garbage, and Louisiana Monroe is Louisiana Monroe. But he looks a lot more confident when he throws the ball right now than he did against us, which is a testament to Florida State's defense.
He does. One of the limiting factors there, I would think, though, is how good is Georgia's defense? Because let's say that he does throw for 70% completions and 325 and 3 scores. That's impressive, and that he's definitely taking steps from where he was in Tallahassee. But now you have to look at Georgia's defense and go, like, are they good at all this year?
A lot of questions going to be answered this week in college football. One of them starts tonight against Virginia. We'll come back and wrap it up on Warchant Game Day. It's an easy one. I've told you guys on the air before. Now, Harry's doesn't know this. Harry's makes razors. They know that. But they don't know that on the Jeff Cameron Show, I've talked about using Harry's. See, I've got the razor right here. Now, this is set up to go to travel because I am traveling this weekend, so I've already prepared. And they gave me a nice little travel-sized bottle to bring with me. Sorry, you want to see this side? This is Harry's. They sent your boy razors and wanted me to talk about it. But I was like, I already use Harry's. I love Harry's. So this is easy. I'm kind of obsessed with razors. It goes way back. I started by getting angry at the cost of razors. You all know we're all men here, and it's difficult. Well, maybe not all men. I don't know. Women might use the Harry's on their legs or something too. I don't know. But the point is, for years, I was searching for the right blade, and I didn't want to spend $1 gazillion on razors. And then finally, I settled on, by accident, Harry's, and now I won't use anything else. I only use Harry's. First of all, Harry's owns their own factory. They've been perfecting and manufacturing these blades the whole blades process they've been perfecting for 100 years. So you're getting the very best blade, and I want my blades sharp. I don't want to have to struggle to shave my face. I want to get in, get out. Look at this baby face. Look at it. I shaved using Harry's this morning. For a limited time, our listeners can get Harry's trial set for only $8 plus a free gift at harrys.com/warchant. Head over to harrys.com/warchant to receive our exclusive discount. After you purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please support the Jeff Cameron Show by letting them know, and Warchant for that matter, that you heard about it on this show, okay? So harrys.com/warchant. Tell them we sent you. You're not going to regret it. I'm telling you, fellas, Harry's, it's where it's at. harrys.com/warchant. So I guess all that's left to talk about here as we wrap it up on Warchant Game Day is, does Florida State go take care of business? Do they go prove for certain that this is a team that means business, that warrants the national attention that they will most assuredly get with this upcoming week facing Miami, a chance to break into the top 5 for Florida State? Or are they a bit of a fugazi? Are they a team that faced Alabama at just the right time, got a quarterback who had never made a start of that magnitude on the road? Is Florida State merely a good team, but not a great team? Had the good fortune of playing Alabama when they did, and now we'll have a good season, not a great season. Well, you lose this game to Virginia, that certainly will be the thought. In fact, that would cause a lot of people to panic, including yours truly. However, they go up there and dominate this football game and punish a bad Virginia defense the way they ought to. It sets up beautifully for the matchup that we've all been wanting to peek around the corner and look at, which is Florida State-Miami. You'll get your chance at some point to do one or the other tonight when Florida State is in Charlottesville. I have a sense that they'll go up there, Tom, and play well. I think there may be a couple of moments where we're wringing our hands a little bit because that's a good quarterback who makes plays. They have some weapons on offense that can make some plays. You're stepping up in competition, and it is your first road game. But I think ultimately, as the game wears on, most will be able to recognize that Florida State is just simply too good and too physical for Virginia, and Florida State gets the win. That's the great hope.
Yeah, I think this group is wound tight in the right way. That's the best way I can describe it. As I was saying earlier in the show, just the way that Gus Malzahn will acknowledge, yeah, that's great. You ran up 700 yards. You're supposed to. I just love that guards against a situation like this being a mental landmine. Now, it could be an execution landmine where you don't, you're not fully in sync. You miss a couple of wide open throws, and then there's a couple of holding calls because the officials get extremely involved in this game. And I don't mean necessarily against Florida State. It's just it's a flag fest. That can take the life out of the game. And things like that can all stack up and lead to a moment in the third quarter where you go, really? We're just going to – this is the next chapter in a weeknight road game in the ACC that's going to be way too close for comfort? I mean, I could see that, but I don't expect it. It's just if Virginia is getting stops, I've looked at this game the wrong way, but there is no evidence whatsoever on their 4-game resume that suggests that their defense is going to be able to consistently stop Florida State on offense. I think the only group that can stop Florida State on offense is Florida State's offense itself through mistakes, and then Virginia's offense if they decide to choke the life out of the football and run Stanford-like drives, Service Academy-like drives for 7 and 8 minutes, or like Alabama did to start the football season, which was a 9-minute drive to start the year. I think that's the way that Florida State gets hindered here offensively. It's if they execute in the red zone tonight and they don't turn the ball over, it's hard to see them not dropping 40. I know my prediction I said 38 because I thought they're going to kick some field goals, but buddy, that defense is slow, and I'm hoping that Florida State does what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I think the hardest part for Virginia to win a game like you're describing and trying to choke the life out and to do all those things, you have to be able to run the ball. And I don't know that they're going to be able to line up and run the ball against Florida State here. Now, your quarterback might be able to, but good luck riding your quarterback for an entire game if your offense isn't predicated on that. And if you don't have anybody else to alleviate the pressure, he has to be a superstar tonight. He might be. He's a good player. He has a lot of ability. That's the element of the game that I'm most worried about is a guy that has a ton of experience, who's played in big games, shows up and plays big. That's how upsets happen. He happens to be their best player at the most important position. So you do worry about it a little bit. But I think at the end, there's just not enough there. And I think Florida State pulls away. It's going to be a fun conversation on Monday, one way or the other. I'll tell you that. I think we're going to learn a lot more. We've been ready for another data point, another lesson.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that variance aside for turnovers and red zone stuff, that we know what we expect out of Florida State's offense against Virginia's defense. The other side is one of those, this is a weekend where we're trying to find out more about teams. This is how you find out about Florida State's secondary, whether Virginia's offensive line's for real, whether their skill position players are for real. That'll be the most intriguing part of the night is when our defense is out there.
So in the end, we've got the Noles winning this game. Both of us do, and it sets up gloriously. One way or the other, we'll be back with you on Monday afternoon to talk about the weekend that was, which will feature, obviously, a lot of big games and a lot of truth serum. We'll find out about some teams, and there'll still be a mystery for several others. Hopefully, we're not one of them. Hopefully, we walk in robust, chest out, ready to talk the talk against Miami. But first, take care of business tonight in Charlottesville, the scene of the crime 30 years ago. Hopefully the Noles dust off the ghosts and make it happen and get that win and stay undefeated. Until next time, be well, enjoy the game, and go Noles.